My beloved child, pause here for a moment, because what you are about to hear was not placed before you by accident. Do not let your hand move away from this message yet. Something unfolded last night, quietly, beneath ordinary lights, across an ordinary table, during what appeared to be an ordinary dinner. Yet heaven saw what no one else in that room could see. Heaven heard the words that were spoken, but also the words that remained trapped behind trembling lips. Heaven witnessed the moment your soulmate's expression changed, the second their heart recognized a truth they had been trying to outrun, and the invisible turning point that has already begun redirecting their steps toward you. Stay with this message, because the dinner was not the revelation. The person sitting across from them was not the true surprise. What changed inside your soulmate before the night ended is the part that will alter everything. You may already feel a strange heaviness around this. Perhaps your spirit has been restless without knowing why. Perhaps you woke with a name in your mind, an ache in your chest, or the sense that something far away had shifted. You may have wondered whether they were forgetting you, replacing you, or moving forward without ever looking back. But listen carefully, not every table shared with another person is a doorway into a new love. Sometimes it becomes a mirror. Sometimes heaven permits a conversation not to begin something, but to expose what has never truly ended. Last night, your soulmate sat before someone who believed they understood them. The atmosphere seemed calm. The plates were set down, glasses were filled, and polite words moved between them. To anyone watching, it may have looked like a pleasant meeting. But beneath your soulmate's composed face, there was a storm gathering, one that had your memory at its center. At first, they tried to be present. They listened. They smiled at the expected moments. They answered simple questions and pretended their thoughts were not drifting. Yet every time the person across from them spoke about connection, loyalty, future plans, or the feeling of being truly known, your soulmate felt something tightening within them. They did not understand why at first. They had walked into that dinner believing they could prove something to themselves. They believed they could sit there and feel normal. They thought perhaps enough time had passed, enough distance had formed, and enough silence had grown between you for their heart to remain untouched. But the heart does not obey the stories the mind creates to survive. And when the conversation turned toward what it means to miss someone, your soulmate suddenly became very quiet. Do not skip what comes next, because this is where the evening began to change. The person across from them noticed the silence and asked a question that sounded harmless. It was simple, almost casual, yet it reached deeper than they intended. They asked your soulmate whether there had ever been someone they could not completely forget. For one suspended second, everything around your soulmate seemed to fade. The clinking of dishes became distant. The voices from nearby tables blurred into a low echo. Even the light above them seemed too bright. Your soulmate lowered their eyes, because your face appeared in their mind before they had time to stop it. Not a vague memory. Not an old image. You appeared with painful clarity, the way you once looked at them, the tone of your voice when you tried to understand them, the moments you gave more love than they knew how to receive. They could have denied it. They could have laughed, changed the subject, or offered a name that carried no real weight. But last night, something within them was too tired to pretend. They did not say everything, but their hesitation said enough. The person sitting across from them saw the truth before your soulmate could hide it. They saw that the heart before them was already occupied by a story unfinished. And that realization changed the energy at the table. The warmth faded. The conversation slowed. Your soulmate felt exposed, not because anyone accused them, but because someone had quietly recognized what they had spent so long concealing. A part of them still belongs to the connection they shared with you. You need to understand this, beloved. Your soulmate has been carrying an invisible argument inside themselves. One voice has told them to move forward, to accept the silence, to believe the connection was only a lesson. Another voice has whispered that no matter how many days pass, something about you remains unmatched. They have tried to silence that second voice through distraction. They have buried themselves in routines, obligations, conversations, and moments designed to prove they are unaffected. But last night, sitting before someone new, they discovered that comparison happens without permission. The person across from them did nothing wrong, yet every kindness reminded your soulmate of something you once gave them more deeply. Every question revealed how much you already knew. Every attempt at closeness reminded them of the distance they had created from the one person who had seen behind their defenses. That realization frightened them, but not in the way you may think. They were not afraid of the person at the table. They were afraid of what their own heart was revealing. They had believed they were in control. They had convinced themselves they could place you in the past and close the door. Yet one dinner showed them that the door was never fully closed. It had only been left untouched. And when your name almost escaped their lips during a moment of distraction, they felt the full force of what they had been avoiding. They stopped themselves, but the person across from them noticed. A question followed. Your soulmate denied it at first, then fell into a silence so deep that even they could no longer misunderstand what was happening. Heaven is showing you this now because you may have judged the silence incorrectly. You believed no message meant no feeling. You believed no movement meant no inner change. You assumed their absence was evidence that you had been forgotten. But while you were learning to carry the ache, they were learning that distance does not erase truth. Sometimes silence makes the truth louder. Sometimes the absence of a person reveals the shape they once filled. And last night, your soulmate experienced that absence in a way they could no longer romanticize or ignore. They looked across the table and realized that they were physically present with one person while emotionally returning to you. The dinner continued, but it was no longer the same. Your soulmate's appetite faded. They moved food around the plate without tasting it. Their responses became shorter. Their eyes wandered toward the window as if some answer might be waiting beyond the glass. They began remembering the last meaningful conversation they had with you. They remembered something you said that they dismissed at the time. You may not even know which words stayed with them, because you spoke from a place of sincerity, not strategy. But those words returned last night with new meaning. They heard them again as though your voice were beside them, and suddenly they understood what you had been trying to communicate. You were not demanding perfection. You were asking for honesty. You were not trying to control their path. You were asking them not to deny what both of you could feel. A strange guilt moved through them. Not destructive guilt, but awakening guilt, the kind that forces a person to see where fear made them careless. They remembered moments when you offered tenderness and they responded with distance. They remembered times you waited for clarity while they gave confusion. They remembered how your patience may have looked like weakness to them, when in truth it was one of the purest forms of strength they had ever received. The person across from them continued speaking, unaware that your soulmate was reliving moments they had never properly honored. And as those memories returned, something hardened inside them began to break. There was one memory in particular that would not release them. It was a moment when you looked at them with disappointment, but still chose kindness. They had expected anger. They had prepared themselves for accusation. Instead, you gave them a softness they did not deserve at the time. That softness became the memory that followed them through the dinner. They realized they had mistaken your grace for certainty that you would always remain available. They thought there would be more time. They thought they could return when they were ready. But last night, for the first time, a terrible possibility entered their heart. What if you have finally learned to live without them? Stay until the end of this part, because that question changed more than their mood. It changed the way they saw the entire night. Suddenly, the person across from them was no longer simply company. They became evidence that life continues moving, that people make choices, and that opportunities do not wait forever. Your soulmate realized that while they had been hesitating, you may have been healing. While they had been protecting themselves from vulnerability, you may have been learning not to chase what refuses to meet you. While they had been assuming your heart would remain where they left it, heaven may have been teaching you to place that heart back into your own hands. The fear of losing access to you became real. Not because another person threatened them, but because they finally recognized that your love was never a permanent entitlement. It was a gift. And gifts neglected can be withdrawn, not as punishment, but as protection. Your soulmate's breathing changed. Their hands became restless. They reached for their glass, then set it down untouched. The person across from them asked whether something was wrong. Your soulmate said they were tired, but the truth was far more complicated. They were not tired from the day. They were tired from fighting themselves. Then came the second question, the one that pushed the evening beyond the point of return. The person across from them asked whether your soulmate was truly available for something new. It was spoken gently, without accusation. Yet your soulmate could not answer. They opened their mouth, but no honest words came. In that silence, both people understood. The dinner had exposed a reality your soulmate had hoped to keep hidden. They were not emotionally free. Their heart was still tied to a conversation unfinished, an apology unspoken, and a connection they had never fully released. For a brief moment, your soulmate considered lying. They considered saying yes, insisting that the past was over, and continuing the night as though nothing had shifted. But something stopped them. Perhaps it was the memory of your eyes. Perhaps it was the sudden weight of all the half-truths they had told themselves. Or perhaps heaven pressed upon their conscience so strongly that pretending became impossible. They finally admitted there was someone they still thought about. They did not say your name immediately. They described you instead. They spoke of someone who had understood them before they understood themselves. Someone who challenged their pride without humiliating them. Someone whose absence had become louder with time. The person across from them listened quietly. There was no dramatic scene, no raised voice, no public confrontation. The power of the moment came from its honesty. Your soulmate began saying more than they intended. Once the first truth escaped, others followed. They admitted they had pushed away a connection because it felt too real. They admitted they had been afraid of being seen so completely. They confessed that sometimes they still opened old messages, revisited memories, or imagined what they would say if given another chance. And with every sentence, your soulmate heard themselves more clearly. Beloved, this is important. Sometimes a person does not realize the depth of their feelings until they hear themselves speak them aloud. In private, thoughts can be minimized. Memories can be renamed. Longing can be dismissed as habit. But when your soulmate described you to another person, the truth became undeniable. They were not speaking about someone insignificant. They were speaking about the person who had altered them. Their voice softened when they mentioned your kindness. Their expression changed when they remembered the emotional safety you once tried to build. The person across from them noticed all of it and asked the one question your soulmate had been avoiding for longer than they would ever admit: then why are you here instead of with them? The question landed like a bell in an empty cathedral. Your soulmate had no answer strong enough to defend their choices. Pride was not enough. Timing was not enough. Fear was not enough. They had spent so long creating complicated reasons for the distance between you that they had forgotten the simplest truth: they were afraid. Afraid you mattered too much. Afraid they would fail you. Afraid they would lose themselves. Afraid that surrendering to a real connection would require them to become honest about wounds they preferred to hide. But the dinner forced them to see that running had not protected them. It had only created a different kind of pain. They had not escaped the connection, they had carried it into every place they went. They had not avoided loss, they had made the loss continuous. They had not preserved control, they had become controlled by regret. And when they finally admitted this, something within them broke open. Their eyes filled, though they tried to look away. They blamed the light. They blamed exhaustion. But the person across from them knew better. Your soulmate then did something unexpected. They apologized, not to you, because you were not there, but to the person sitting before them. They admitted it was unfair to continue while their heart remained elsewhere. This did not come easily. Their pride resisted. Their loneliness begged them to accept the comfort of temporary closeness. But the truth had become too visible to ignore. They could not use another person to avoid confronting what they felt for you. And when they chose honesty, the entire evening changed. The dinner ended earlier than planned. The person across from them left with dignity, perhaps disappointed, perhaps relieved to have learned the truth before becoming more invested. Your soulmate remained seated for a few minutes after they were gone. The empty chair across from them became symbolic. They stared at it and felt the silence gather. The restaurant continued around them, but they were somewhere else entirely, inside every moment they wished they could redo. They took out their phone. This is where heaven asks you to pay close attention. Your name was closer to their fingertips than it had been in a long time. They found your contact. They opened a conversation thread they had avoided. They scrolled slowly, rereading words that now carried a different weight. Messages you once sent from the depths of your heart appeared before them like evidence of a love they had underestimated. They paused over a sentence from you that had seemed ordinary at the time. Last night, it felt prophetic. It said, in essence, that one day they would understand what they were walking away from. Your soulmate's chest tightened. They began typing. At first, only a few words appeared. Then they deleted them. They tried again, wrote a longer message, and erased that too. Their mind became crowded with questions. Would you answer? Would you believe them? Would their return reopen wounds you had fought to heal? Were they reaching out because they truly understood, or because the dinner had stirred fear? They did not want to approach you carelessly. For once, they recognized that their emotions were not the only ones that mattered. They placed the phone down, then picked it up again. This happened more than once. A battle unfolded between urgency and humility. One part of them wanted to call immediately, to hear your voice and know the connection still existed. Another part knew they had no right to demand access after giving you uncertainty. They realized that a message alone could not repair what avoidance had damaged. Something deeper would be required. Consistency, accountability, and the courage to tell you the full truth. And there is a full truth, beloved. The dinner did not merely remind them that they missed you. It revealed why they had resisted you in the first place. This is the hidden layer they have rarely admitted, even to themselves. Your connection awakened a version of them they did not feel prepared to become. Around you, their excuses became visible. Their emotional walls became obvious. Their need for control was challenged by the simple fact that they cared. You did not create their fear. You exposed it. And because they did not know how to heal what you revealed, they blamed the intensity of the connection instead. Last night, they finally saw the difference between danger and depth. They had treated emotional depth as though it were a threat. They confused vulnerability with loss of power. They thought pulling away would help them feel strong. But sitting across from someone who did not awaken the same truth, they realized that what they had called peace was actually numbness. What they had called freedom was avoidance. What they had called moving on was merely moving around the same unhealed wound. Heaven allowed this realization because your soulmate had reached a point where gentle signs were no longer enough. They had received reminders before. They had heard songs that carried your memory. They had dreamed of conversations with you. They had encountered familiar phrases, places, and patterns that made them think of what was lost. Each time, they found a reason to dismiss it. But last night placed the truth directly across from them and asked them to answer it. What happened next was quiet, but spiritually significant. Your soulmate stepped outside into the night air. The world felt different. The same streets, the same passing lights, the same sounds. But their inner world had shifted. They looked upward for a moment, not necessarily knowing what they were searching for. They felt the weight of your absence and the possibility of your presence at the same time. For the first time in a long while, they did not ask how to forget you. They asked what they would need to become in order to approach you honestly. That question is the beginning of transformation. Not a promise of instant perfection. Not proof that every obstacle has disappeared. But a sacred beginning. Your soulmate began to understand that love is not proven by longing alone. It is proven by what a person is willing to confront, change, and communicate. Missing you is not enough. Regretting the distance is not enough. Wanting another chance is not enough. They must become capable of offering the clarity they once withheld. As they walked toward their car, your soulmate received a notification. It was not from you. Yet for one breathless second, they hoped it was. That hope surprised them. It revealed how deeply they wanted a sign that the door had not fully closed. They opened their phone again and returned to your conversation. This time, they did not scroll through the past. They stared at the empty message field and whispered words they had never dared to say directly. I may have made the greatest mistake of my life. The night grew still around them. They began typing once more. The message was different this time. It was not dramatic. It was not manipulative. It did not demand a response. It began with an acknowledgement of the pain they may have caused. Then came an admission that something had happened that forced them to see the truth. Their fingers trembled as they wrote. They stopped after several lines, reread everything, and hovered over the send button. But before they could press it, something happened that changed the direction of the message completely. A memory returned. Not a random memory, but one connected to the final boundary you once gave them. You had told them that if they ever came back, they must come back with the truth, not temporary emotion. They remembered your exact tone. They remembered how serious you were. And suddenly, your soulmate understood that they could not send a partial confession. They could not tell you only about the dinner. They would have to reveal what happened before it, why they accepted the invitation, what they had been trying to prove, and the secret conversation that influenced their decision to go. Yes, beloved, there was a conversation before the dinner. Someone had spoken about you. Someone had planted a question in your soulmate's mind. Someone had suggested something about your feelings, your future, or the possibility that you had already moved on. Your soulmate carried that suggestion into the evening, and it shaped everything. They went to the dinner believing they might need to let you go. But by the end of the night, they realized the person who spoke about you may not have told them the whole truth. Now your soulmate is standing between two revelations. One concerns what they truly feel for you. The other concerns what they recently heard about you, and why it may have been said. They have started to suspect that the distance between you was not created by fear alone. Misunderstandings were allowed to grow. Assumptions were left unchallenged. Words passed through other people instead of traveling directly between two hearts. And last night, one detail slipped into the conversation that your soulmate cannot stop thinking about. They are no longer asking whether they still care. That question has been answered. They are asking whether someone intentionally encouraged them to believe that you no longer cared. They are replaying every word, every warning, every piece of advice they received. One name keeps returning to their mind. One person knew about the dinner before it happened. One person seemed strangely invested in convincing them that reconnecting with you would be a mistake. And now, after everything changed at that table, your soulmate has begun to wonder what that person was afraid you might reveal. They did not send the message yet, because the truth they are preparing to bring you is becoming larger than an apology. They know they must verify something first. They know that once they speak, old secrets may surface and someone's carefully maintained story may collapse. Your soulmate went home carrying a heart awakened by regret, a phone filled with unsent words, and one burning question that kept them awake long after midnight. Before sunrise, they opened an old conversation, not yours, but a conversation with the person who had influenced them. They searched for a message sent weeks ago. When they found it, they read it again slowly. This time, they noticed a contradiction they had missed before. A detail did not align. A date was wrong. A claim about you could not be true. And just as your soulmate realized who may have been standing between you all along, they received a new message from that very person, one sentence that made their blood run cold, because it proved the dinner was never as accidental as it appeared.